Welcome back, everyone. My name is Kyle. I'm with Danny, and we are talking House of X issue number 5 this week.
The gift need not come from a single entity. A smaller portion from many as possible be warmed. Your own flames would be diminished by the amount sundered.
Now, last week we talked Powers of X, and before that we talked House of X issue number 4, and crazy stuff happened. We saw some people die. A lot of people die.
Oh yeah, death abroad.
Death all over the place. We saw a little bit of ascension with some robots and some pondering if these human mutant robot hybrids in the future should be assimilated or should they not. And we're still getting the outcome of what will happen with them. But leaving off in House of X issue number 5. You ready for this? How are you feeling? What is your overall thoughts going into this? What did you feel last week? How do you feel about last week? What do you feel about this week? This week's going to be crazy. We're going to learn about a lot of stuff. We're going to meet a lot of new, old mutants, obscure mutants coming together to do some interesting things. Yes.
Oh yeah, across the board. I mean, House of X and Powers of X building up to this point, 1 through 4 on each, has been a nice build up to what is really starting to pay off in a conclusion that they're shaping out. It feels like the end of the overall arc is starting to be more fleshed out, but there's still enough going off where there's excitement and anticipation in the air after the end of this issue, both also in House, but as Powers as well. And I'm excited to see how it pays off in the grand scheme of what Hickman's trying to do with the overall story arc. But just in this issue alone, there's so much they conclude from what they've been building up that you're just like, oh, wow. You're left shocked, you're left confused, and you're also left with a little bit of fulfillment, like an actual legitimate, like, wow, he made this, he orchestrated something really unique here and like made it actually work in a very organic way and not like a very ham-fisted way. And that's what I'm appreciating most about House of X issue 5 and Powers of X issue 5 is there was a lot of good payoff, a lot of good crazy twists happen.
A lot of good payoff if you've been paying attention throughout the weeks that we've been discussing, because the way Hickman does it, he teases, he gives you little snippets here and there, and he moves on, right? But each week it builds on that, and if you're paying attention, it pays off. And this week, it's going to pay off quite well, I think.
Quite grandly, yeah. The real basis of what the mutants are trying to do here in Charles's grand scheme is flushed out in a very clear and I guess you could say transparent way. Like there's a lot of subterfuge and mystery going on in the background with the greater story and what Charles' intentions are, and they highlight that actually, I believe, a little bit coming up in the conversation with Namor and what he calls Charles out on, and we'll discuss that. But more so, you get to see really what Charles is trying to do and what their game plan is and what their greater ideal is moving forward and trying to utilize all the mutants they've brought together and the nation they've established. And you just see it all like really unfold and at all the workings, like on the forefront with all the people and in the background with the secret motives that are being developed and flushed out. Mm-hmm. And on the forefront on the ground front with what the humans are trying to do to react to it, which is great. I love it. That's the highlight really right off the bat about this issue, is you're going to understand a lot about what they're doing. You'll have your questions, but you'll see like, oh, okay, this is how they're going to move forward. This is now what we have to understand about the X-Men and the mutants and just the greater Marvel landscape, because they throw down the gauntlet to the whole world, and you see the kind of the reaction of that.
We do, and we see a lot, and we see it in a good way, and it pays off. So let's get started. You ready?
Oh yeah,
let's
jump right into it.
So we start off on Krakoa, and we're met with Polaris and Magneto, and essentially Polaris is just all like, "What good are humans?" and Magneto comes in and he's all like, well, humans did one thing good. And what they did is they went from they taught us how go from hunter gatherers to an agrarian culture. Essentially, what we could learn from humans is societies, how they structured societies and how they formed societies. And that's kind of the basis for how this mutantdom, this mutant nation is going to take off. But as this happens, uh, we're met with Charles Xavier and Storm comes in the room, and behind them we are met with the Five, or the coming of the Five, if you will. Now, these, what did you think when you first saw this? It's a great panel. It's all this like action, the walking pose, the typical walking pose
Yeah,
that you see.
I called it it was like the astronaut walk where they're like walking out, getting ready to do
Yes.
their mission. They're like the top notch, well trained, like militarized soldiers ready to do their badass objective and like perform in a way that is above and beyond that of their peers. And it really is highlighted in just this like walk up scene.
Oh yeah.
Oh man, what a group to see too. When you see these five people, you're like, okay, like this is an interesting like cavalcade of mutants here. What is this team for? Like, what's their purpose? Because they're some powerhouses here. Well, and then there's gold balls, but
And
that's
there's gold balls.
that's the weird thing. Is like you look at it and you're like, okay, I kind of see the theme with like the other mutants because you got from like going left to right, you've got Rogue, Proteus. At first, I thought was Jean because Hope looks a lot like Jean, and like I didn't realize until later on when they were discussing like who they all were. I was like, oh, that's Hope. Okay, which
Yes.
she's
Hope
got her
sounds.
similarities in there, and then Elixir, which Elixir
Yes.
is got some crazy powers as well. He's on an Omega level with all these other people to an extent. But then you have Gold Balls.
Gold
Gold
balls.
Balls, like a man
But
whose mutant power essentially is shooting golden balls out of his chest, which gets expanded on here in a really crazy way. But
yeah,
just the visual of this crew is very interesting.
yeah, it's a very eclectic group to come together, to say the least. And let's go through the list again. So we have gold balls. He creates eggs essentially, and we're shown we're shown or told essentially this story through Magneto's telling Polaris everything, being a narrator through this, and he's just saying like these balls that he creates are actually eggs, right? That's the redcon to his kind of powers, these eggs that he creates,
Yeah,
and we're gonna see he's the basis for what we're about to see. So Fabio Medina
yeah.
Gold Balls creates the eggs. Then it moves on to Proteus.
Moira's kid.
Yes, this is Moira McTaggart's kid, and he essentially is like a reality warper.
Yeah,
Uh,
localized reality warp, right? Because I believe his reality warping is kind of more proximal to his existence and not just passive throughout the whole multiverse. Like he
mhm,
does reality warping in a localized space, whereas someone like I guess you would say like Franklin Richards, his reality warping is pretty much boundless, and that's
right.
the way to kind of measure them. But yeah, Kevin is such an interesting character, and how they utilize him in this is pretty funny because like he essentially makes Fabio relevant due to his powers and how they can join
Right.
off of each other. It's great.
Yes, and this is how they become eggs. Is like he essentially kickstarts and transforms them into this essentially eggs, nesting,
A
nurturing.
viable egg.
Yeah, a viable egg. Think of it to host life.
Yeah, because
Um,
Fabio's like whole retcon is that the golden balls that he just shoots out of his chest unlimitedly, like infinitely, he gets this weird retcon where they're actually discovered to be eggs, but they're like unusable eggs. They're eggs that
unusable.
they're
Yes.
essentially they're unviable in any way, shape, or form. They're useless eggs that can be just shot out of his chest. They're an unlimited amount of biological matter, but they are not active in any way, shape, or form. So what happens is that Proteus comes along and with his ability to warp
Yes.
reality actually impacts the egg and makes it a real egg. Like, he just changes it and says like, oh no, these eggs you've been shooting out of your chest, they're actual eggs now. Like, I just have to touch them and then boom, you have a real egg. And it's like, so now Gold Balls is a walking, talking egg factory. that
Yeah.
that is real. Like, it's quick. In this issue, you quickly get like a development that starts to mutate in a fun way where you're like, wow, Gold Balls, you're turning into something much more relevant than anyone could have hoped you ever were. And I heard about him. I never actually read like any of the X-Men issues with him in it because he got introduced after I kind of like stepped away from reading X-Men in like
Same.
2013. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I would hear about him and I'd just like scoff and be like, well, what the hell is this? Like, this Gold Balls. And I like how Hickman came along and was like, I got a use for this guy. I can make him relevant. Like, I can take the most obscure characters and I can make them relevant. I can write Magneto as like a sympathetic character towards humans. I can write Charles to be more like Magneto, which you see a nice transition here, like how we led into this. They really highlight their characters differently. And then you see him take like Fabio here and just go, hey, we're gonna make you like the point man for this like mutant group of like 5 mutant celebrities or demigods amongst mutantdom, because that's how they're viewed. They kind of touch on that later on. But yeah, like not to tangent too much, like we're on Proteus now, who him being a character that is someone who's pivotal to the X-Men team and working in tandem with them, like we should note that is actually a really unique thing, because he's usually very chaotic and much more
Right.
of like a force to be reeled in, something that they don't have working like clockwork or like a well-oiled and greased cog to like kind of keep their world going, because normally they're like, oh god, Proteus is loose, like he's having a tantrum and he's gonna just try to destroy the world of reality and we got to rein him in. Now they're just like, oh yeah, Kevin's part of the team. He's a good kid. And they actually explain more about how he works later on too. And like one of the, I believe the actually the little like side legend at the end of this issue, or I think Powers of X, one of those, but that'll be great. We'll have to go into more on that when we get to it.
Yes. So moving on, after Proteus makes his eggs relevant, we move on to
Invalidates Gold Balls.
yes. We after that, the DNA of the preserved mutant is injected into the egg. Now, this is important. Remember, in the past, we talked about where this DNA has been collected over years
Yeah,
because of
stockpile.
what we've learned in the past with Sinister and Magneto and Professor X and their agreements.
Yeah, they did. Essentially, Sinister is doing something similar to something that we actually have in real life, actual physical, tangible science today, where we can point to this DNA database that is stockpiled of different people's genetic information across large areas and large swaths of population. And Hickman's actually bringing that to play, and you think it's sci-fi. You hear it, and you're like, "That's crazy," but that's the beauty of all this, is that a lot of this stuff is a parable to actual real life right now and our near future that we're approaching.
Exactly. And it's interesting. It's very interesting. So after the DNA is added, we move on to Elixir's role. And Elixir essentially kickstarts the life at a cellular level, more or less. Now, what do you know about Elixir?
So Joshua Foley, I love Elixir. I think he has one of the most interesting character portrayals throughout the X-Men over the years.
Mm-hmm.
I really got into him when he got forced into the X-Force titles back in like the later 2000s. I think like I don't remember who was writing it at the time, but I remember they portrayed him as this very reluctant pacifist, because he's not like Wolverine or any of those
Mm-hmm.
people who can really embrace their murderer side. He's more of a medic. That he's the one to heal, and they illustrate it in an interesting way because he has to embrace his darker side. And he literally, his skin goes from being gold to like an onyx black, like a obsidian kind of level of black, like that kind
Mm-hmm.
of deep, almost reflective. And that's what happens when he uses his mutant powers to actually murder instead of heal or regenerate or rebuild. But overall, his actual mutant abilities are phenomenal. The things he could do with them, the weird like tricks that he can pull off. Them using him in this way almost is ingenuitive, but also still limited because like there's so much other things he can do, and I'm sure they'll bring out more stuff. Like I don't think Hickman's just gonna lean on Elixir as just this one cog that's a part of the 5-person wheel that is the 5. I think Joshua will play a bigger role in other things because his power set is just so endless. There's so much he can do, and I really feel like the way they're going with a lot of the development of Krakoa and the unique materials they're bringing out of the island, I think Elixir will play a bigger role in that stuff as well. Because, gosh, his powers are so cool. I remember first time I read him, I was like, wow, that's actually pretty broken. Like, I'd be like, oh, I could cure your cancer, or I could give you cancer, or I could warp your genetic makeup and make you into something like that you wouldn't be recognizable just from one touch. He can make you into a whole different person.
Clever person. Or like, remember in the Rick and Morty episode where Morty threw those balls and destroyed those people at the genetic level and just like kind of melted them. I bet you he could do that as well.
Oh, and they turned into the tiny little, like, they grew the arms and legs and started running off in different direction. You talking about that where it cut up like the policeman and then the cars and then they like
Oh, I think that was a gun. Like he used a gun for that, but after he did that one, he threw a ball into like the crowd next to the tank, and
he
it
became
like
the Akira. Yes, I know what you mean.
yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
yeah.
I totally think Elixir in that moment, except instead of technology, it's just he touches them and just destroys them genetically. But yeah,
he's saves them.
Yeah, he's an omega level healer. He could heal instantly. He could resurrect. He could just destroy you pretty much. He has a death touch. He has a death touch. He can just touch. He's like death. He can just touch you and like kill you.
He turns like his skin color changes because he's normally like gold. Like he's literally like golden hair, golden eyes, golden skin, all that. It's ridiculous. But then when he does his death touch, his body changes to reflect it, which is pretty cool. I like that they added that little flair to his mutation. But I mean, if he can get his hands on anything, he can biological. He can rework the DNA and genetic makeup of any biological material that he comes in contact with. So if he wasn't a good person, a morally obliged person to want to help people or be kind of on the good side of things, he would be force to just be reckoned with. Like he could just destroy so many people so quickly. Think about it. He could create a biological like bacteria on the fly and just like commit genocide. Like he could just genocide.
Isn't he somewhat emotionally unstable?
He goes into a weird, I guess you could say, moral struggle when he deals with the fallout from X-Force, where he has to actually kill someone, and that puts him into an emotional imbalance. And that kind of makes him have like his mutant powers kind of play off of that, and it really messes with him psychologically. But I don't think he's anything like a schizophrenic type.
Okay. Yeah. He's not like Legion or something.
Yes, exactly. Or he's not like Legion, where it's like a lot of like their actual mental disabilities that are impacting him now. Right. It's just more of like, I think it's more of a moral struggle, like an emotional struggle. But yeah, crazy. I love that they brought him into this and that I think he'll play a bigger role. Hopefully. I mean, he's always underused. Always. But,
Agreed.
What are you going to do? That happens to the best mutants.
It always happens. I mean, when you have so many mutants to work with, like, you kind of get lost in the sea.
Trying to figure out what to do with gold balls. That's what ends up happening.
Gold balls.
Who do we got in the roster? Let's bring out gold balls. He doesn't get
gold balls. What could we do with gold balls? I got an idea. We turn them into a mom.
Yeah. My baby.
My babies.
When he like deals with that, he treats all the mutants like they're his children. He's like, "How you been, Cyclops?" He tries to like pick him up and hold him. I miss you so much. Are you eating enough? Oh, geez.
That's funny. All right. So after he kickstarts the life, we have Ava Bell, and Ava Bell is going to speed things up. She's going to essentially bring them up to speed, time wise, life wise, right? Age them up.
Yeah. She has that weird like kind of temporal time manipulation ability. Which kind of reminded me a lot of Sway. Do you remember during like Endangered Species, when I believe it was Ed Brubaker was writing, and they introduced Gabriel Summers, like the third Summers child?
I remember Gabriel Summers.
Okay, so when they introduced him, like Charles made a new X-Men team that kind of actually fits in between the bookends of like the original X-Men going into the giant size. Like before the giant size X-Men got introduced, actual like Wolverine and Storm and Colossus proper, that crew, like there was an actual proto team that went in before them where Cyclops comes back from Krakoa, everyone's trapped. Cyclops is distraught because he thinks everyone's dead. So Charles puts kind of like a little mental numbing agent into his head to kind of give him a bit of like ignorance is bliss scenario where he can deal with it. And he goes out after that and tries to build a new team. And he ends up discovering that there's a third Summers child, that Gabriel Summers is out there and has similar powers to Cyclops and Havoc. So he recruits him, recruits a couple other people like Prodigy. You know about Prodigy. Or Darwin.
Yeah.
Darwin, I mean. Darwin.
Oh, Darwin. Yes, I know about
Yeah.
Darwin.
Yeah,
I
so
like
Darwin's
Darwin.
a part of it. Yeah, he was crazy. Like his adaptive abilities.
He could adapt to like anything, which is pretty cool. I dig that.
Evolve on the fly. Like I remember when he's put in a situation where he had to fight like the Hulk, and his body evolved by like teleporting, and just teleported him like on the other side of the world. Like, that's the best way to handle this situation.
This is the best way to handle this. Just let's get you out of here as quick as possible.
Let's just send you somewhere far from here. Good job, you survived. And then they brought in there was like a mutant that could control I forget her name, but she could control the earth, like had like telekinesis. And then there was Sway, which is like she could rewind or fast forward. I think she could rewind or fast forward time just a little bit. And she kind of had a similar function as to what Ava Bell did when she was introduced. I didn't know too much about her, but when I looked into her, she's another one who showed up around the Gold Balls time frame. She was introduced in like 2013, and it just like reading her story, it felt like they didn't want to resurrect Sway when they wrote her, and they just wanted to make a new time-based character that was kind of similar to one that already existed, which they do in X-Men a lot. Like that happens. Instead of bringing back characters, they'll just make a new character that's kind of similar to them, and you're just like, oh, that sucks. Poor character. He got overwritten. But yeah, Tempest was an interesting one to find more about. She seems very powerful, like even a little bit more than what Sway was. So that's kind of the cool part about it. But aside from that, she does still seem like just a different palette. Like in a fighting game when you have a character that's just a different color, just a color swap.
Yeah. Created by Bendis.
Yeah. Makes sense.
So she times them up, ages them up, you know. And then the cherry on top, the final piece of the 5 is Hope Summer. Now, Hope Summer is that's a I don't know where to start backstory wise on that, but let's just say she's from a different future, and she comes to this timeline.
No, she's from our timeline, but she hid in a different timeline.
She
grew up in a different.
She grew up. She was taken from the time. Wasn't she taken?
Yes, she was taken forcibly because when she kicked off the start of, I believe, Endangered Species, the arc that started in like the latter part of the early 2000s, and towards the end, like around like 2006, 2007, and she was born as one of the first mutants to be born since M Day, since the whole No More Mutants story arc happened with Scarlet Witch, where she was just like, I'm going to reality warp the entire world to not only depower a bunch of mutants, but I'm going to eliminate just a large population of mutants and make all mutants sterile, so like no more mutants could be born either. And she created this huge rift that started a ripple effect in the X-Men comics that came to a head when Hope was born, because they were like, oh shit, mutant's been born. That hasn't happened in years, and we need to get on this because everybody else knows about it. And so like Purifiers and the Human League and all those like anti-mutant establishment groups are going out to try to kill the mutant. X-Men are trying to get there. Mr. Sinister wants to get there. So like the Marauders are in tow. And there is Cable, who's revealed to actually be first on the scene. And he takes her and he ends up running to a different time frame, like time jumping to keep her safe, because Bishop is chasing after her to kill her, because apparently Bishop's future ties into her existence, and she's one of the reasons why his timeline goes to shit. So Cable spends the whole majority of her childhood or teenage years and into early adulthood just time jumping and trying to keep her safe. So she grew up in multiple different timelines, displaced from her actual true timeline, which is the main Marvel timeline.
This
which
is
convoluted.
Messiah Complex?
It starts, I think, in Endangered Species and kicks off into like Messiah Complex, and then like goes through the Messiah War and like Second Coming and all those really
Hmm.
like biblical sounding titles. But those are like, in my opinion, that was like some of the best of the X-Men writing, because it's a culmination of all this stuff going back to like what Chris Claremont, and even going back to freaking Stanley and Jack Kirby. But yeah, like it was a really good introduction to a character that seemed very promising, but then bringing it for full circle, it kind of, they dropped the ball with her, because like they hit the point of like Avengers versus X-Men, and they just turned Hope into this kind of subplot that wasn't as important. They at the end of the story arc, they kind of gave her significance, but really over all of Avengers versus X-Men, Hope was like, seemed like the least important character to the whole arc. Like until they brought it full circle, she wasn't elevated to a relevant character until the very end of the arc, and they were like, okay, well, Hope is going to attempt to undo what Scarlet Witch had done many years prior. But
Right.
yeah, bizarre character, riddled with time displacement issues, like a typical Summers. And she's an
Just like all the
adopted
Summer Kid.
Summers. Yeah,
Yeah, she's not even a real Summers.
yeah. She's not a real Summers, but they wanted to make her as official as possible. So they were like, we're going to give you some sort of time displacement nonsense into your origin, because it's like you're not officially a part of the family until you get a bit of that.
Right.
And she's insanely powerful. Not only does she make the mutants around her stronger, but she has the ability to just mimic all the mutants in her presence, like powers. That puts Mimic to shame. That puts
Yeah.
people. Um, I guess you could say current Rogue is up there, because I heard that she now, from what I understand, she doesn't need to touch the mutants to mimic their powers now. I think has a more unique way to. I think if she already has them, she could reference them. I believe, in a way. I might be wrong,
Okay.
but I
Okay.
know that they've upgraded her a little bit in the newer issues that have come out. I just can't
Interesting.
remember right now, but yeah, Hope Summers, hands down, is probably one of the more broken mutants in existence, especially like the best
In
mutants
the
are
best
there.
ways, yeah.
Yeah, then she's like unstoppable, because she'll culminate all their powers into one. Like imagine if you had all the most. I always like pictured this. I was like, you take the most powerful psychics in all the Marvel mutantdom, and you would put them with her, and then she could just like destroy anything instantly, like on a Phoenix level. Like the only thing that could take on a Phoenix possessed character would be all the mutant psychics like standing behind Hope, and then I feel like they could rival each other.
Maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
But yep.
possible.
But yeah, she's like seems to be the leader, whereas Gold Balls is the point man. Hope
Hmm.
Summers is the leader to this five mutant celebrities.
Yeah, she essentially synergizes with all the other mutants and kind of brings them all together. Yeah, and as they do this, the next step after Hope Summers, after the egg is created, um, that's Charles's turn. No, wait. After that, they're hatched, right? The eggs are
Yeah,
hatched.
yes, correct. Because you get them brought up to speed by Ava Bell. She's the one who kind of does them in a quick incubation kind of style, and then
Yeah.
once they're hatched, Charles comes in and he's got like a running database of like all the mutant psyches, and he just transfers it. Kind of all of how like a lot of psychics like can put themselves in new bodies. They actually note on it later on. It's like, Charles has done it twice on his own. He's helping these people do it. He's done this on his own. Like he's
Hmm.
uploaded himself into something without, being there physically. He's forced his consciousness into like a body, a husk, if you will.
A husk. Not
Yeah.
that husk, but a husk.
Yeah. Yeah, not the husk, but a husk. That would be a different story. A darker story.
Because yeah, like the eggs after they're hatched, they're just shells still, the
Yeah.
husks, if you will, or husks. And what after Xavier imprints the kind of memories and the mind of the mutant into the body, you get a fully fledged resurrected mutant, and this is Hickman saying that X-Men could be resurrected at any time at any point. Now, some could take this as Marvel editorial, just taking a lazy writing approach to bringing back characters, but I find it
Possible.
pretty fascinating, and I think it might be maybe 40% that, but I would say like 60% of it is just Hickman doing his thing.
He's trying to build, like, he's really aggressively trying to build a universe that has a nomenclature that is really fleshed out. Like, he's setting the rules and the precedent now. So moving forward, we don't have any confusion on how this world works. Like, what is this paradigm and what is its functionality? And Hickman's saying, here it is. Here's the building blocks. This is how we're going to work for going forward. Going forward, we now have the trope of death in comics being like a selling point kind of removed. That's taking that off the table and replacing it with this unique concept of now, like, any character can be written in an extreme way, and the fear of death will not be there to limit them. We won't be
Exactly.
using it as like a lazy trope to fall back on, because creating this weird mutant biological 3D printing like group of heroes here to like function as like an actual thing in the X-Men universe is a very unique plot device that I feel has a much better effect in the longer story getting written, like a much better defense to it. It allows you to kind of remove a lot of that worry, because in X-Men and greater comics, to an extent, it's become a bit of a lazy trope to just do the I killed off this character this issue, and that's the whole premise. The crux of this issue is like, oh,
Right.
I'm just killing off this character. Like, we weren't really building up to anything. This issue was like starting to like lose a lot of readers, and so to try to save it, maybe we'll kill someone, and that'll try to get people to buy it or check it out. And it's like a lazy writing trope to fall back on to try to add like spice to your watered down story. And Hickman's removing that concept. He's revolutionizing it, and we're getting a new era of X-Men that I like. I really do like what he's set up. I can digest what he's putting forward in a way where I'm not like, oh my god, this is stupid or this is lazy. Like, I'm actually like, okay, I like what you did here with like the clones and how you like reinvigorate them. And I like how you break them down. Like, he wasn't trying to be coy or sneaky about what the clones are and how they work. He wasn't trying to be facetious in any way. He had literally Storm there as the conduit between us as the reader and the characters as they exist in the world, helping us lay down the factuality that these are them now. These may be copies, but their actual psyche is in them now, which is an interesting point that you could kind of go on in itself. Is like, now, is this concept of the soul in its philosophical terms to Charles, is it just a mental uh is it just a mental psychic energy that can be melded from the astral plane into any of these husks as they label them, or is that a copy? Is that a duplicate? Because it seems here they're kind of focusing that it's like they have the one psychic energy and it is being moved from husk to husk. And that's what kind of legitimizes what's going on here, is that it's not just a backup, really. It's also kind of the embodiment of what their psychic energy is. Though there are things that kind of you could kind of see it as a still like a copy. It could still be a copy, but I mean, they
Sure.
make it seem like a neural network, like a legit neural network that they kind of dive into later on how this is all stored and kept. And so that starts to make you think, okay, like maybe they are pulling from that network, but that network is like the one symbiotic existence of their psychic energy that still persists even after their death. And that makes it feel like, okay, these are them. These aren't just the copies of them. We're like, oh no, we lost, because I mean that's happened. Sinister does that all the time, where he's just like, oh no, you killed Sabretooth and Pyro and all these other guys. Well, that wasn't them. That was just my clones I made of them. Here they are again. I'm the third clone of Sabretooth, and you're just like, okay, whatever. Where Hickman approaches this in like a less ham-fisted way. He does it in a much more gentle way, where he's like, okay, this is just like, you can suspend a little bit of disbelief here and really digest that this is a more structured paradigm that he's pushing forward with, and not too loose, not too just. I don't have to. I don't have to eat up too much BS to like get my fill of just actual content in this ploy. I'm not like, all right, whatever, Hickman. I'm more of like, okay, this is fair. This is believable. You're doing okay. You're starting to get a little shaky, but okay, you kept me. You stuck the landing.
You
He
stuck
definitely
that
stuck the landing.
landing.
He did. He did. It
Can't
works. It
say.
really does.
Um, yeah, I'm digging it, and I agree. I agree to a certain extent. I agree. I think too, but I do think that Hickman is just trying to get rid of the idea of death being a big issue for sure, because that's such an it's such an emotional, like nonsensical story point that we could just stop doing as a culture.
Yeah, it's socially accepted lazy writing at this point. It
Yeah,
is it is it is known socially. Like it is not like, oh, you have to really dig into it to get that concept. It's like now just like people who don't even read comics will be like, oh, they killed off so and so, like they must be really trying to sell comics right now.
yeah.
Yeah, crazy stuff.
Crazy stuff. So we got the group from the mission, the entire mission. I'm talking Cyclops, Wolverine, Angel, Husk, Mystique, Nightcrawler, Jean Grey, Penance, all back, all
And
resurrected,
all extremely naked.
and all extremely naked, but the clouds of dust and smoke are conveniently covering up everyone's naughty bits.
Yeah. I was expecting them to use like how they do in like a lot of animes back in the day where they try to like cover it with like a flower or like a piece of like a weed or something growing up,
Yeah,
and you're just
sure.
like, but there's this like superimposed plant in front of their like junk, and you're just like, that doesn't belong there. That is not a part of this animation. What am I looking at? That would have been funny if they did something like that, but they were like, no, we're gonna do the tasteful wispy clouds. Long hair and wispy clouds.
uh, that's funny. And this is how, oh, essentially, and then after that, Storm is all like, "Yo, mutants, let's go. We got some stuff to do. I know you died, but you got to keep going.
It felt
There's
like
no
Starship
there's no
Troopers.
dying.
Like,
Yeah,
on your feet, mutants. You want to live forever?
you want to live forever." And that is the beginning of this issue. We literally the title just we haven't even got to the title of this issue yet, and we're 40 minutes into this podcast.
Yep.
Great, it's great.
Yep.
So that's
You.
that's how great this issue started off as.
It's like when I watched There Will Be Blood, and then they like ran the movie title, and you're just like, wait, we're like 40 minutes into the movie, and the title just happened. No
Right?
one's even said anything. Like this is all visual drive. Wow. But yeah, there was a lot happening just even in like the first four panels, and then you get to the actual title sequence, and you're like, holy crap, we're still going. There's so much more to unpack.
So much more. So much more. So now we move to kind of like I guess a meeting room or like a yeah, I'll say like a town hall meeting. It's like and Storm's just like, "Yo, brothers and sisters, check out this miracle that's happened due to the work of the Five." And like we said earlier, they're like celebrities. People like adore the Five now.
They want to touch him and stuff like that.
Yeah,
There's
they're all
like a
touching
panel
oh
where all
gold
these kids are
balls.
running up and
Gold
they're like
balls.
touching gold balls. They're like touching them in the chest. They're like, ooh, is that where the balls come out?
Right?
You're so cool. I have all your trading cards. Dude, he's got a first edition gold balls. What? It's hollow. It's so shiny. It's so gold. You know what this scene reminded me of though too? Is it kind of reminded me of that like that pre-orgy scene in the Matrix movie? Where was it the second Matrix where they had like that
Yes.
crazy they were in Zion and then that
Matrix,
crazy
yeah,
underground
too.
party? Yeah, like it was totally like a like Storm kind of had like her that Morpheus moment where she came out and she's like, "What's going on, everybody? We're still alive! Woo!"
Yeah, it's like, look at,
As
they're
we
still
celebrate.
here. We can't die, bitches. Look at us. We're still naked.
Yeah, they're still super naked.
Yeah, they're still super naked, and Storm's just all like, "I see them. Do you see them?" And they're all like, "Yeah, we fucking see them." And then Storm's all like, she shushes the crowd. She shushes the crowd, and she's all like, "But do we know them?" And then the crowd's like, "Ooh, ooh." And essentially, she goes, she's like a
She's got the
preacher right
look.
now.
She's even
Yeah.
got the look and everything. She looks back at the fucking comic book panel and she's like, "Oh, do we know?" There's so much snide in that look. Look at that, dude. I tell you, it's like the cadence was just like Morpheus. I loved it.
Yeah, yeah, it was pretty very like powerful,
Yeah.
impactful. Um, so she goes and she goes through each mutant. She kind of tests them to prove that they are who we think they are. And the first one, of course, is Cyclops, and she's all like, "How do I know you, brother?" And then she's all like, "Once I thought I was strong, a leader of mutants, and then you showed me what a strong was." And I think that's referring to when like he didn't like let Storm be a leader at one point when it probably would have been a good point.
I believe
Uh,
that's during Claremont, right? He was
so,
like Claremont was writing him, and he had Cyclops kind of start to drift to the back of
yeah,
the relevance of the X-Men, and Storm kind of noted it, and at that point she challenged him for leadership, and it kind of came down to a test of wills. They didn't use powers or anything. It was just a straight like, all right, who's in it? And like Cyclops at that time, like Psych was out of it. He was just like, I don't even want to be here.
yeah.
I miss Jean.
Yeah, he's just this is post Gene stuff, so he's all sad about Gene still
Yeah.
and super depressed. Like he just went on a downhill spiral that never really recovered. I felt.
Yeah, he didn't. He never really did. And now, actually, honestly, all this years later, it feels like this is kind of the first time where Cyclops is truly recovering in a way that makes him feel like the old school Cyclops, the OG Stan Lee era Cyclops from the Golden Age, you know? And
Yeah,
Storm highlights that here in the way she talks to him. But yeah, I definitely remember that moment where they like the challenge came up and she just cleaned Cyclops' clock.
yeah, and there's even a moment in X-Men issue number 2, kind of teasing a little bit of the future. But as we see Krakoa fusing with something else that I won't speak of, uh,
Yeah.
essentially Cable's just like, what's happening? And Cyclops is very like self-referential of the situation. He's just all like, this is kind of what happened. This is kind of like how my beautiful mistakes all happened, referring to like all his bastard children.
Yeah. Well, in those issues to come later on in the current stuff that's going on, Cyclops plays the role of like paternal father really like openly, and it is
It's
a new
weird. It's
era for
different. Yeah.
Cyclops. It's definitely
It's
a new era for Cyclops.
we're gonna see something new with him. I'm kind of excited. It's because
And,
it's been the same old for him.
and this nod was beautiful. Like even just this quick little dialogue between both of them kind of brings up a lot of that history.
Yeah. So essentially, she's all like, "What do you think, people?" And the crowd's just like, "He's a fucking mutant!"
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Can,
then,
can you dig it?
can you dig it?
Oh man, it's turning to the Warriors real quick.
And then she moves on to Jean, and Jean's just all like, Storm says, "How do I know you, Jean?" And she's all like, I'm the only one that I've ever been. I'm the only me." She said something like that, right? She
Yeah,
said,
she's like, I'm Gene because I'm the only Gene that's ever been Gene. I'm the most Gene you've ever seen.
"Yeah." And then the crowds are like, "Yeah, she's a fucking mutant. We accept her."
Now, can you read into that as like maybe like a platitude to the fact that there have been many attempts by many writers over the years to supplement the role of Jean Grey into many different other psychics,
Like
albeit
Madeline
clones,
Pryor and
Madeline
all
Pryor,
that.
some Marvel girl like Rachel Summers,
Hmm.
from the future, and then you could even say to an extent Emma Frost and how she played her relationship with Cyclops, the Cuckoos, or the other psychics that come along throughout the time. Like there were many of them that felt like they were being forcefully used to fill that void that was left by Jean when she died. And I think this
That's kind of
weird,
touching on it, you think?
yeah, this weird, almost tongue-in-cheek like response feels like it could be nodding to that. Because
I
I
could
like when
totally see that, actually.
I thought
Yeah.
it was funny. I was like, oh man, that's like almost kind of like a real like blasé thing to say. But then I'm like, okay, wait a second. I almost could see that this is like a nod to the fact that many people have tried to replace Jean and in her role in like the X-Men and the X-Men universe as a greater mythos. And she's like trying to like say right here in the like the least like provocative and most straightforward way, like I'm the only Jean and I will always be the only Jean.
Yeah.
so you hear me, or Aurora? Do you hear me? And she's like, oh, I hear you. I hear you. This is Jade. I know this one. I recognize this bitch. I love
Yeah,
that.
I could totally see that. I could totally see that for sure.
Yeah.
So moving on, then we see Monet St. Croix penance, and then essentially Storm tries to go up and touch her, and she's like, "Nope, get the fuck away! Don't touch me!" And Storm kind of laughs it off, is like, "Oh yeah, this is her for
This
sure."
one, Em would totally say something like this. This is just
Yeah.
funny. Like, you're invading my personal space. I'm sorry. Straight to danger. Straight. I need adult.
I need an adult. I need an adult. And everyone's just like, yeah, she's a fucking mutant.
Woo.
And they continue going through them, and then we see Magneto and Xavier kind of in the corner, just like talking, and they're just kind of mutants, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Against the mutant state, or if they could be
Yes.
accepted into a mutant state.
Yes, going back to the original powers and House of X, when they fleshed out the storyline with what this all started with, is that the mutants are now putting down the new terms of like how their sovereignty and anonymity is going to impact the greater, I guess you could say, United Nations and political paradigm moving forward. And the vote for that is all coming to fruition. While all this is popping off, like all the X-Men dealing with the time travel issues and the multiple lives, the embodying issues with the AI and the growing mechanization of the human response. All that is playing off in the background while they're still trying to deal with their sovereignty. So it's like there's a lot of subplots and greater plots that are flowing into each other right now. And you have a nice little moment where you kind of get Magneto and Charles kind of seeing it all play out and then kind of like soaking in how things are working out for the better and that their plan seems to be taking off with little to no issues that they didn't foresee. And
Mm-hmm.
it's weird too because you look at this moment where all the vibe, but it also has a weird revolutionary society vibe. So it almost feels like you could have a negative connotation to it, but it could also see it as a positive affirmation to what they're doing. And the line is so thin, and I don't know if Hickman did that on purpose to kind of mislead us and keep us guessing, but the line is so thin now where I used to be pretty heavy, especially with that issue we read in X-Men, I think 1, where they introduced all the Summer family again. Like that
Yeah.
kind of felt like the Stepford Wives and shit. Whereas this kind of feels more revolutionary, kind of like that. Like I said, it embodied that moment in the Matrix where they're at Zion and like everyone is just like, we're the last of the mutantdom. We're gonna survive. And I like that there's that line because then it subverts my expectations. It completely subverts it. It's too
Right.
close to tell, and I'm like, okay, I'll just ride that line then while reading and keep that in my mind as I move forward. And it's great here, and you get a lot of like the stuff that's tugging at that with Magneto and Charles talking here, acknowledging
Yes.
what's happening and like how the mutants are developing.
Yes. So much is happening. So much is going on. But Charles says, not today. Today we are filled with nothing but hope. Um, because things are about to pop off and things are about to go down, but not today.
No,
And
today
moving,
is just the beginning.
yeah, moving forward, we go to our Hickman-esque charts, and he talks about the resurrection process essentially.
Oh
And
wait, but we're skipping the part where all those children
oh, right,
grow up to those
yes,
naked mutants.
sorry. And we go back, and there's a scene where the resurrected is being essentially swarmed by the rest of the mutants, and it's weird because they're naked. They're all
Yeah,
naked.
because like for example, like when the five came out, they were all clothed and they have like kind of a unified costume, which is
Yeah,
actually I like the design of those.
I
How they're
dig the
like
costumes.
the
Yeah,
the white, the gold, the black, all meshing together. That's really cool. But they never bothered to clothe any of these mutants after they resurrected them, and they're all just standing there naked in front of all these people. And like when the five left, they went through the crowd and everyone ran up to them like they're celebrities. But now with the resurrected X-Men team, they're kind of like martyrs, so they're kind of their sacrifice is really important to people. So they're kind of like societal celebrities as well in themselves. So they get the same treatment, but they're naked when they're walking through the crowd. So like all these
Yeah,
people running up to try to touch them while they're naked, it's just a funny visual.
it
Because I'd
is
be
so. Yeah.
like, what are you like? Just get on your hands off me, children. What
No,
is
this
this?
my this my ass.
Just get out of here. This is like you're trying to set me up. Where's Chris Hansen?
Here's hands.
And they animated it in such it's so like it's so epic. Like you have the sun in the background, and they're all silhouetting right underneath the sun, and then everyone's running out with their hands stretched out, but it's like they're just buck naked.
Yeah.
It's like watch where those hands are going. I guess except for Wolverine, he's hairy, so I mean he's almost clothed.
Yeah.
But yeah, now we get into that was the last little tidbit before we get into some of Hickman's delicious charts.
Yeah.
Ooh,
The chart
Hickman.
life. We're going to
charts.
chart life.
I
Like,
read these issues just for the charts now. I don't
just
even
for the
care.
charts. Yeah.
I want a compilation of the charts to come out.
I need like a sound drop just for the charts, like a chart jingle.
We're transition, and this is the part of the podcast where we go into the charts.
Yes.
We're gonna give you statistics and breakdowns of different types of intelligences and AIs, and this is going to be now the next hour. Oh, good times.
Yes. So we start with the genetic base, and the genetic base is what we got from Mr. Sinister, which is the repository of mutant genetic material that has just been kind of assembled and collected and copied and updated over the years.
Yeah.
Without this, we have nothing, essentially. And this library began solely as biological samples and has now been converted to holographic sequencing. Do you know what that would even entail?
Now, I figure that like the holographic sequencing is a way to utilize the data in a more, I want to say, a more fleshed out storage, like something that has a lot more width to it, in a way that can be utilized in a smaller space. I think that's what holographic sequencing is. It's just the changing of the media, the hardware, to something that can utilize a lot more storage in a smaller space. But I may be wrong, because I actually have not looked too much into holographic sequencing. It's just the little bit of computer and hardware knowledge I have leads me to believe that holographic sequencing is just a fancy way of saying we can store more data in less space.
Less space. I'll have to look into that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's the evolution of what Sinister's been doing all over the years. I mean, that's his bread and butter. That's how he figured out that, like, oh man, if I splice the DNA of Jean Grey with Scott Summers, I can make a ridiculously powerful mutant. So him having a database and knowing how to sequence and store all the mutant genetic information is par for the course for someone like Sinister. And this is a cool culmination and evolution of that, which is something that we get with Cerebro, with a lot of other technological and science concepts in the X-Men mythos. Like, we're really getting the forefront of older legacy technology in the X-Men story.
Yes, because cloning and whatnot is not a new concept. This has been going on for quite some time.
Yeah, gene sequencing, it's all. But
Hickman's really fleshing it out and really laying down a language, if you will, a framework and a language for you to actually understand everything. Nothing's kind of confusing, kind of where all the pieces fit.
Yes.
So he's really laying the groundwork. Like, we keep saying that. We've probably said that every episode, but he really is like laying down a lot of things that have been missing for some time.
Yeah, this feels like it's so ambitious that it feels like it has to hold to the greater Marvel mythos from this point forward. If it doesn't, it just cheapens all of this, because this stuff is so ambitious, but it's very foundation based. So it's perfect for moving forward in a new direction with the X-Men mythos and the storytelling from this point forward. And if he adheres to what he set up here, it's going to play out really well, and it's going to have a nice kind of progression to it. But if anyone coming after him starts to really just throw all this out, then like all this fucking bricklaying is just going to go to waste. And it's such good bricklaying, so it's like I don't want to see any of this go to waste. I like this evolution of what he he's done to Mr. Sinister's research. Like, this is an actual, like, relevant way to evolve what he's doing. I mean, he could have want more carte blanche with it and gone out of left field, and, like, it would have been kind of dumb because it's a wasted opportunity. But here he was like, okay, time has passed. Sinister has been doing research with this genetics over the years. Let's make it evolve in some way. Let's push it forward. Let's see how we can utilize it in a grander scheme instead of just doing the same, concept over and over again. It's like, yeah, Sinister has all this DNA, but what does he ever really do with it? For figuring out how to make the best mutants by combining what, like, we're not seeing too much payoff from that. That stuff is just left to sit in the background. And Hickman's like, you know what? Let's fucking flush that shit out. Let's use it. Let's actually make use of it instead of just recycling that concept 9 times. Let's grow it. Let's evolve it. I mean, no pun intended, but let's evolve the research on genetic engineering, But yeah, I love it. It's great.
Yes, I'm digging it. I'm enjoying every moment of it. So, genetic base, Mr. Sinister's genetic database is just one half. The second half is the host, which we just saw played out in this issue with the 5, and it goes on to kind of lay out what each of the 5 does, which we kind of talked over a little bit, but we'll briefly touch on it again right now. So Goldball, he makes the eggs. He's the mother.
Yep.
He's the womb, if you will. Proteus.
He creates an unviable biological egg. Like, literally, that is his mutant power. Yeah. He makes an egg that is stillborn.
A stillborn egg, yeah, pretty much.
He's still fucking ridiculous. Even though they've put a little more relevance to his mutant power, he is still utterly insane.
You think his eggs taste good? Like, if you fried them, you fried his eggs, you think they're better scrambled?
Like, if this whole mutant didn't work out, like, he could open his own restaurant. Come on down to Gold Balls. Get yourself some omelet.
All right, and then we move to Proteus. He warps reality and transforming the unviable eggs into a viable one. Makes those eggs useful. And then moving forward to Elixir, a mutant capable of biologically kickstarting the process of life, initializing cell replication and husk growth.
Now, couldn't Proteus, in an extent, and I know I'm splitting hairs here, but don't you feel like Proteus could actually do Elixir's job as well? Like, I feel like if you have reality warping, wouldn't biologically kickstarting the process be something far within this grasp? It's funny how they're like, fuck, we needed 5, but fuck, they Proteus on the team. It's kind of
5. Yeah.
I mean, couldn't even Proteus, in a sense, do Goldball's job as well?
Yeah, I mean, Proteus could do a lot of the work.
I never see do any time stuff, so I guess Ava Bell is there, and Hope is just there to make them better at what they already do anyways. So
yeah.
This could have just been a triad, but what are you gonna do? Hickman really wanted Goldballs to shine.
It was all about Goldballs, really.
This is the only reason why he wanted to get into X-Men. He was like, I'm gonna write my fucking Goldballs story. He will get his epilogue to his great adventure.
And then we have Tempest. Tempest matures the eggs to the desired age. And
the husk in the eggs.
Yeah, the husk in the eggs. Yeah,
because they're incubated with what Elixir does. So Joshua essentially creates the husk, and then Ava will come through and age it up to pretty much where they were when they died. Or they actually spoke on that. It's actually probably the most healthy and fit and biologically sound version of themselves. So not even what they were when they died, but like a better version of what they were almost. That's what they kind of allude to. I caught that in like just some of the ways they were describing it. Because it's not like it's. I think they might touch on it more after this, but I might be getting ahead of myself. But I do notice that that's something they kind of threw out in passing, is that they're not copies, they're improvements even, in a way. Yeah, at least biologically.
Interesting. Oh, yeah, that would make sense too. Why not?
Yeah, why create like a flawed version of them? Like, oh no, like we created Scott, but he's got like fucking like, fucking like lung cancer, and they just recreated him.
Like, why'd you bring me back? What was the point?
Well, you got another 4 months till it kicks in. Constantly bringing it back with 1 day to live. Just cure me or kill me. God, no more. Yeah. Crazy stuff, though. And then we end on Hope because she's the final key to all of this.
Right. And Hope just kind of synergizes them all together to ensure a perfect incubation.
Yeah.
And
Which
then,
is,
oh, go ahead.
let's say, which is cool, but I mean, also kind of interesting how, like, because she can mimic their powers too. So I don't know how making them, I guess, synchronizing them and allowing them to like connect their powers and work in a way where she can kind of feel them all at once and lead them to finish what they're doing is, I guess, like a unique way to kind of attach her to the whole thing. Because she's another weird one too, where her powers are so wild and radical. It's like this team is a very strange team, but also works in a way that Hickman lays it out where, okay, it makes sense. I believe it, but also I still question it because I'm like, who are these people to be working together in this way? But then I'm like, oh well, I guess if you take each part of their power and focus it in that one way, it does work. The science is there. The science in this sci-fi is there. It's just used in a very, very unique way.
um, yeah, agreed. Uh, then we move on to the mind. And actually, let's go back, touching on that. There's a few notes. The Proteus problem. Did you read that?
Yeah, that's actually what I was talking about earlier, how they kind of utilize this to help Proteus as well. Is
Yeah,
that his big issue in the past is that, like, when he psychically possesses someone, they burn out eventually. He like
yeah,
can only have a host for so long until they get burnt up by the sheer just magnitude and awesomeness of his psychic force being the host of their body. So they use the weird husk system that they could develop to create like constant replacements for Proteus's body. But the thing I was never 100% sure about is like, is that just a generic host like that they're creating, like a
right.
base, like there's no like a vanilla nothing to it, or are they basing that host off of the traditional original like Kevin McTaggart? Like I never actually got like a true definitive answer on. I don't know if you picked up on that either.
Right. Okay. I don't. Yeah, that's a good question.
Like I know they said that the Hust or something like that. They said it was created from like a genetic base, but I can't remember if it was Proteus or something. They said that there was there's a genetic base. Oh no, I remember now. It's Charles Xavier. Okay, yeah, no, it's Charles Xavier is the genetic base for Husk. It's or not for
Oh, it
Husk
says
for
it
the
right there.
as the
Yeah,
Husk. Yeah, it
I
should be
just
in
read
that
that.
section. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so like it's not Proteus's original legacy body, it's Charles Xavier's legacy body, and Proteus is just housing it, which is kind of dope because does that mean he has access to Charles's mind?
Right. Oh.
Like his mental powers combined with Proteus's reality warping? That's scary. And he's a
Right.
being of pure psychic energy, so who
That
else
is
better
right.
to possess than Charles, you know? Yeah, but that's cool. And then they only last for like a week too. Like it's like a week or a couple weeks, and it's like then they gotta grow a new one, and then hope Proteus possesses that. Got a new body here for you, Proteus. Hop on in. And then like a body of Charles Xavier just burns away in psychic like mist and vapor. Oh man, Charles is gonna be a little like put off by that, and he's like, man, I gotta kill myself like every week for this kid.
Right.
Not even his dad. uh,
So
yeah.
the third part of this is the mind, which is what Charles's job is. He
Wait, what about that little like blurb they had about Mimic? Like, did you understand what they were touching on there with the about like Mimic and Cinch?
While it
Snitch?
has not been tested, it's believed that upgrades, extension, standage could be assisted by mutants such as Sync or Mimic.
Like, how do you
S-
interpret that? Is that like them trying to say that like
they could
they
be
could?
upgraded. They could, certain mutants have the ability to, especially like Sync or Mimic. I would imagine that they get like a certain about, they probably get some of Cerebro's powers a little bit.
Well, like the thing that I could tie this to and that kind of makes sense is that notice that in the other issues when they go to the future they have the Chimera mutants.
Yeah. So,
Maybe that's what the upgrades and extensions come from. I don't know about stand-ins.
well, okay.
Stand-ins, what
So
do they mean
go.
by that?
So that's what I'm not sure of, but what you're touching on. So go down to the bottom of this page in the mind and see it says note. There has been no experimentation regarding what happens when you combine a mutant mind with a husk that is not their own. And I'm assuming that the chimeras were the result of that
Yeah.
experiment or that thought process.
Well,
If you
that's what
actually play that out a
because
little bit.
with Mimic, I get that that's what they could do because he's able to copy the powers of all the people around him. And the cool thing is that you notice that one thing here also that I want to tangent on real quick is it says mutants. Did you know such as Mimic? So now
Yeah.
Mimic has been a debated mutant for a while. Is he a
Right.
mutant or is he like a mutate? Like he's like a human mutate where he changed in like a process of science and chemical reaction mutated him, like more like Spider-Man.
Right.
But I guess this and what
So
Hickman's saying here is he's
he's saying
officially
he's a
canon
mutant. Yeah.
as a mutant, which is that's really cool because he
Okay.
Mimic goes back. He was one of the first people to join the X-Men after the original five were assembled. He
Hmm.
actually like did some missions with them and was a part of the X-Men in a proper way, which was really cool. And I think the issue he was introduced was like the last issue written and penciled by Jack Kirby and Stan Lee. So that was like a really significant issue. Is like they introduced him, he can mimic everyone's powers, he's part of the he's someone to actually join the X-Men. But there's always been this weird debate behind whether he was a mutant or not, and I like that this finally ends it. Because in the last I guess iterations of him being written in like a main story arc, they were kind of still debating it, and there were some people who gave some definitive things where they're like, "Oh no, he is a mutant," but then like another person came along and was like, "Well, actually, we don't know." And like, hopefully, this will be what sticks because I feel like Mimic not being recognized as like an OG original X-Men style type mutant kind of cheapens his history. And the use of him later on with the, I imagine that's what the chimeras evolve into, is them taking Mimic's power, and that's why we get those weird characters that are like an amalgamation of Colossus and Nightcrawler and Magic and all those weird different characters that they tried to put together. And that like we only saw like two or three chimeras, but the two or three we saw was like an amalgamation of like five people, and that's pretty much what Mimic could do is like copy five or four or five mutants at a time.
Mm.
Yeah. So this was an interesting little
Ah.
note. I mean, it's a
Yeah.
small note,
Okay.
but
That makes sense.
it
Yeah.
yeah, it weighs heavy. And I wasn't making that connection originally until like I noticed that. I was like, wait, I get what Mimic is doing in here. I don't know anything about Snitch. I'm not familiar with that character, like
Cinch.
Finch. Yeah, I'm not familiar with his like his background or any of his stories, but I know enough about Mimic where I'm just like, okay, I can see that. Maybe the stand-ins part that they're referencing in the notes here is tied to him in some way, but I have a feeling he's probably pretty close to Mimic or someone like Rogue, where he can just mimic other mutant powers, copy them in a way, probably by touch or probably by like some weird connection thing. I have
Is
to
it
see.
cinch or sink? It might be sink.
I think it's Sync. Is how you pronounce it. They spell it weird with a Y like that.
Yeah.
Like a lot of those more edgy. This leads me to believe he's a '90s
He could
or
duplicate. He could duplicate the
X-Men.
powers of anyone else, pretty much. He's in Age of Apocalypse, Days of Future Past, House of M.
Yeah. Okay. Huh. Oh yeah, he was part of like the Shield program in House of M. He was like one of the Shield agents that like
Mm.
they had a bunch of mutant like Shield agents because it's a different reality.
Ah,
Okay, and I liked Age of Apocalypse, but I don't remember him in it at all. Huh, weird. But okay, so maybe he's another aspect that they use to make the upgrades and extensions. I still wonder what they
right.
mean by stand-ins. Like, are they talking about you know how like a lot of like political affiliates will have doppelgangers?
Maybe.
They're gonna start making like, oh, stand-ins. Wait a second. Oh, you know what just happened recently
Hmm.
with that death?
Which death?
The most recent death, the big death.
Oh, the big death. Yeah. Oh,
Not to give too much away,
okay. Okay.
but
Okay. Shoot.
this could be Hickman laying the tracks again Oh man, I'm
Wow.
I'm
So
so
this could be a
excited.
retroactive like thing we just might have pointed out, but for you folks who were not like caught up, I guess remember this moment for the
Yeah.
future. So then we go to the mind, and essentially Xavier backs up every mutant once a week to the latest version. He has a pretty badass redundancy system. It's
Oh
just
yeah.
a bunch of backups, of backups, of backups, and it contains how they think, how they feel, and all their memories. Um, and then he
Super
injects
database.
it. Yeah, it's just a giant database, and then he injects it into the husks.
Yeah, via his psychic transference ability of just like slaps you in the head and he says you're you again, wham. It kind of looks like that, or it looks like he just walks up and he just places out his hand and all of a sudden you're just uploaded with you, all your brain kicks on and you reboot and you're just like, oh, I'm me. I died because they remember everything up to the point they died, so it's like when they like pop back to consciousness, they're just like, oh, did it work? did did my death like matter? I'd really like to know that. Oh man, they put the husk of Husk back into Husk.
They
I
put the
just thought
husk
about
with the
that.
husk into husk.
Oh man, that's a very meta. That's a very meta process for approaching the resurrection of Husk.
Okay. Then Hickman goes to talk about the scale, and initially they started out at 1,000 mutants a week or 200 mutants a day, about. But there's like how many mutants died? 16 million, mostly from Genosha. So at that time, it would take about 300 years to bring back everyone. But then they started getting better at it and was able to get like 30,000 a week, and to get it down to about like 6,000 minds a day.
Saying that Hickman was ambitious with what he is doing here is almost putting it lightly. Like
Uh,
it took a while for it to set in the realization that he is not only bringing back like the mutants who died recently, but he's
no,
retroactively going back and bringing back people who were massacred, who have been
everyone.
just assassinated or taken out in any way through the I guess they're saying, I don't know how far back they're going, but I guess if they should legitimately be alive still today, they're bringing them back. But there is a caveat, because if you aren't confirmed as dead, they will not resurrect you. If you're just missing, that's the one caveat, is like you won't be brought back if you're not legally confirmed as dead. If they can't actually point to you and be like, this person is 100% dead. If there's any debate, you don't get brought back. You're just left out, which is good, because then that would be kind of shitty if you like showed what the fuck am I doing here? We thought you were dead, and you're like, no, I was on vacation. You asshole. Well, now I gotta kill
In a way,
myself.
yeah.
The other you was like, I want to live. Too bad there can only be one. I could see this being used as like a war aspect where they're like, let's just clone a bunch of Wolverines and just send an army. Let's get about 10,000 Wolverines and we can win any war. It's so ambitious. They're bringing back like around, they're trying to reach around 30,000 people a week.
That's insane.
They said full Genosha resurrection would be achieved within like a decade.
Yeah, 10 years.
Yeah.
It's
So
crazy.
that's nuts. Like wow, like they're going old school with it with the mutant numbers. Like we're gonna go back to a time where they're like super
Everyone, yeah.
large
Hundreds,
number of mutants,
thousands, thousands,
millions,
thousands,
millions.
millions,
Yeah,
millions.
because like when I started getting back into X-Men, the numbers were low. There was like 198. Literally, there's like the 198. That was the big thing moving forward from like no more mutants. And like House of M, they were just like, no, there's only a handful of mutants left. That's why like they got more radicalized and the stakes got higher and the story became more, um, I guess you could say more gritty, because their
Mhm.
lives and the importance of death and the survival of the mutant race was much more significant. Now they're changing it back to where like the mutants are an established force in society and they can't be killed off. Like we're going to start getting like returns from a lot of different people that we haven't seen in many years. Like I wonder if there's a packing order, like if there's like mutants that they deem more important are getting resurrected sooner, or if just like eventually like 4 or 5 weeks from now, like so and so is going to show up and we're going to be like, oh, you're back finally. They're great. Like I'm interested to see where they go with that.
When are we gonna get Goop back?
Oh yeah. It's not. Did you say Dupe? We get
Goop,
Dupe.
yeah, yeah.
Is
I
he
said
dead? They killed
no.
Dupe off?
I don't think he's dead, but
I didn't see. He's supposed to be pretty bad. He's supposed to be pretty badass. So I don't
yeah,
know if they could kill him off. He's like really just out there in super meta. So I don't think they could truly kill him off. But there's plenty of old characters that have been killed off that were mutants. Like they might bring back like Typhoid Mary. We can get that. That'd be great. Let's get some Typhoid Mary. I don't know, but this is very ambitious. Like I was saying, like all these people being resurrected and this mass return of like large quantities of mutant population really does make them viable. And they don't just feel like they're an island. I mean, when they had Utopia, it felt like an island of misfit toys. I loved Utopia and I liked how they did it, and I loved the stories being written at that time. But never did it feel like a nation. It more felt like just a small, like we're just the island of misfit mutants, and we're here, and it's whatever. Now it feels like, oh, you're a real nation again. You're a real society and ethno state, if you will. It's crazy stuff.
indeed, indeed. And then it's noted that the five are like inseparable after all of this process. They're just like, we have given birth to the mutant nation. We are one.
The euphoric about it. They're like
They're
riding
very,
in the post
yeah,
euphoria of just like trying to do the right. They feel very fulfilled as a group because they highlight the fact that their inseparability and their drive towards doing this is like a blissful experience, but not a self gratifying and blissful experience, but more of a fulfilling blissful experience of like a purpose filled experience of like mattering in a significant way that has an actual merit within one's own emotional weight. And that is kind of cool. It takes away, like, it starts to take away that, are they a creepy cult and are they starting to get overzealous? It kind of still beats that back and says, like, no, they're a society that is knee deep in a revolution. It's
yeah,
crazy. Crazy twist with the X-Men characters.
yeah. Interesting. And then we go into resurrection protocols. So it takes about 48 hours for the DNA samples to get into an egg, and 30 to 42 hours for the egg to mature. Um, because of fears regarding duplication, unless an actual death has been documented, someone believed to be dead cannot be resurrected until the death has been confirmed or they have been undetectable by Cerebro for at least 1 month.
Oh, okay. I didn't know
So
about the Cerebro part.
yeah, so that they have standards in place before they resurrect someone.
1 month, really, though? I mean, people in the X-Men mythos go on like space adventures and interdimensional time shenanigans all the time. I feel like 1 month is not a long enough time. Like, I'd say give them like 5 years. If they don't show back up after 5 years, then close them. Because they like 1 month, you're gonna run it. I feel like you're gonna run into a little bit of overlap. A little bit of overlap. I mean, how long is Cable usually gone? Like he usually disappears for like years on end and then comes back.
Sure, sure. Um, but moving forward, actually, we could talk about the notes because they might also be teasing some things we're seeing in
Yeah.
X Force as well.